Disclaimer: this video contains a lot of hard-to-swallow realities, so I water it down with humor. This is a geopolitical analysis. It's not about morality, it's about reality, a simulation for the sake of science. It is not an endorsement of any kind of any action. Thank you. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. With the disappearance of Israel, we can expect the disappearance of its population. Yeah, countries are fake entities that are actually made out of people. Shocking, I know. There are 3 versions of this chant, but the most used one in the West is the most ambiguous one. من النهر إلى بحر فلسطين ستتحرر, or من 100% فلسطين عربية, or من 100% فلسطين إسلامية. The other versions in Arabic for some reason were not chosen to be the leading slogan in the West, but what they mean is, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, or from water to water, Palestine will be Arab, or from water to water, Palestine will be Muslim. On second thought, the Israelis can just convert to Islam, but why would they? A peaceful interpretation of من 100% فلسطين عربية can also be the Jews agreeing to study Arabic. You are an Arab if you speak Arabic. My Arabic is not good enough for that, so maybe all those Jews who have Arabic ancestry or are Mizrahi can stay. I learned that I have some Arab genetics in my family recently, so 20% of Israelis are Arabs. So I'm not sure if the end goal is to make them disappear as well, or if the scenario most people have in mind is just banishing the Jews. If you apply the Hamas standard, that would include the Arabs. They are traitors. Anyway, I don't know if it matters that much.
But have you seen how beautiful this day is today?
Now let's imagine a world where suddenly all the Jews disappear, or all the Israelis disappear, and Palestine is finally free. How would the corrected world will finally look like? First, we have to celebrate. There is no more Israel. This is a time for celebration. Now let's get real, because this is where things get interesting. So what's gonna happen? Alright, for Palestine to be free, we need to define what is Palestine exactly. I'm not saying it like, what is Palestine, the way Mossab Hassan Youssef says it. No, I'm just saying that because I know the consensus in the West is that Palestine is a country occupied by Israel. So to the Western audiences, the obvious next step is to finally give the Palestinians their country back. A nation among the nations. But I feel like people forget that having a country is just boring bureaucracy, mostly. You have to do so much boring stuff that when the Hamas was asked about, they explicitly said was not their job. Things like water supply, electricity, policing, creating work opportunities, ensuring food security, and even bonus features like courts and education. According to Hamas, that's the job of the international community. This is a governmental system that was historically known as colonialism. Shock. Also, if you read the Hamas manifesto carefully, you might learn that colonialism is exactly what they believe in. Fine, let's move to the Palestinian Authority now and see what's happening there. Can they do the mundane things that are not fun to do so that Palestine could be finally free? What is the minimum requirement of a state? The German sociologist Max Weber defines the state as a human community that, successfully, claims the monopoly of the legitimate use of physical force within a given territory. This is something the Palestinian Authority gave up on, especially outside of Ramallah. They willingly gave the keys to the IDF, but the IDF is gone now. Alhamdulillah. There are many different opposing forces in the Palestinian community. They use their force to punish, not only to defend. So every clan has its own justice system. There are many reasons to why the Palestinian society is so fragmented. There were 4 papers published lately by a German, Israeli, a Brit, and an Iranian. And even though it looks like they were literally crying when they wrote down the final conclusion, a Palestinian state is not something that is reachable. Not now. Here is what I imagine now. Western audiences sitting, listening to me and saying, no way. Are you saying that the resistance are stupid? Are you saying they don't know that? No way, this is just propaganda. Well, don't worry. Palestine does not refer to a state. It refers to a geographical area. It's not about an entity called Israel that is occupying the state of Palestine. The problem is the Jews that inhabit the physical geographical region that is called Palestine. Perfect.
And they get Europe next, easy.
The only thing is that even though Palestine is definitely not about the Palestinians, it would be kind of sad to have another Afghanistan so close by. But who would take care of them?
Okay, help.
Most of the countries in the Middle East really are unstable. And not only that, they do everything that they can not to get involved with the Palestinians who they unfairly labeled as a destabilizing force. I don't know how many snowflakes are currently watching this, but I'm sorry to burst your bubble. Without an effective army in the area, it will be really, really hard to keep the area stabilized. And when I say hard, I mean absolutely impossible. Somebody has to step in.
Which is very unfair because responsibility sucks and it's, why does it have to be you? I get it, like, we get it, like, believe me.
Who's gonna manage the area when Israel, the country that should not be named again ever again, is not there because it's close by though. It's very close to Europe, way closer than Afghanistan is.
If you face up and you say, listen, we've made a mistake. We have supported systems that, populations that grew and grew and grew, and all they do for work is beg for money and give birth. But they live in a desert. So the desert, not sustainable. They're all gonna continue.
So who's gonna take care of the Palestinians?
Okay, before that, a little sidetrack. The Jews are the most famous dwellers in the region that are not Muslim nor Arab, but they are not the only ones. For example, you have the Samaritans, Druze, and Christians. None of them fall neatly into the definition of Muslim, and many of them don't see themselves as Arabs either. There are also Muslim minorities Israel currently actively protecting. Some of them are communities that actively asked for refuge from Israel and protection. So there will be a period with no policing. Those who don't fall neatly to the Muslim Arab category will probably follow the Jews to wherever the Jews went to. Yeah, back to Palestine. An area equals resources. Resources are like a cake. Israel has several natural resources. Gas, that is relatively newly found, and chemicals, mined at the Dead Sea. So how would that cake be cut? If I forget you, Jerusalem, let my right forget its kill. Other than natural resources, there is one very famous resource, and that is Jerusalem. People like taking over Jerusalem for the ego trip. It gives them, that's a very important cause of natural highness. Yeah. The Dead Sea is shared with Jordan, and Jordan might be able to take over. They might take over the water resources while they're at it, as they currently depend on Israel for water supply. The problem is that water is a hot commodity in the Middle East, so a war between Jordan and Syria is not unlikely. Another obstacle that might pop up is that taking over the different water systems is not that easy. There are the Israeli desalination plants, water reuse technologies, and so on. And it does require expertise. Ideally, the Jews before disappearing would just pass that knowledge on. But if they won't, because they suck, that kind of knowledge might be needed to be outsourced. If the Jews won't voluntarily disappear, the implication of applying the groundwork needed to show them the way out might leave those infrastructures with a need of repair. That means investment.
money. But I don't think it's an issue. I'm sure the students marching on campuses will not hesitate to cover the costs. It's not realistic though. Jordan will probably just collapse. Jordan will not exist without Israel. Jordan is dependent on Israel. I mean, the Jordanians are mostly Palestinians, so it makes sense they would enjoy exactly the same fate as the Palestinians would. Anyway, Europe's real fear is all the refugees that might come from what was Jordan, what was Palestine for about a minute. Somebody has to take care of these people so they won't all run into Europe, and they might have to ask the Ottomans, I meant Turkey, for help. Turkey is situated in the most comfortable geographical position to be responsible on doing that. The only thing is to make sure the Sultan stays happy every day and everything is perfect. You also have Egypt, but they don't even know how to do it properly. Of course, Europe would have to bribe it. It would have to bribe Turkey as well, right? Turkey is not gonna do it for free. They never did. They don't care about the Palestinian children. I promise. The children, they don't give an F about. But they fancy Europe. They like Europe. At some point, Europe just wouldn't have that amount of money anymore that would satisfy whoever that would be. Especially if they don't like Europeans for some reason. Oh, I wonder what reason that could be. Allahu Akbar. That is the scary part. But we want to be optimistic here, so let's say either Egypt or Turkey. Maybe Turkey would make more sense because they don't have to go through Egypt to get to Europe. They have to go through Turkey or the seas. There is no real reason for Egypt to go above their own territorial water. And because they want to avoid the Palestinians like a plague, I don't think they would even want to take over this area because they wouldn't want to deal with the consequences of having radicalized population coming into their country and trying to establish another Muslim Brotherhood regime in Egypt. It's not that they're doing great in the democratic scale anyway, so don't push it. It might explode, we don't know. Don't go there. Bad idea. In theory, Europe can also decide to side with Iran, since Iran has all those militias all over the place, but this cooperation between Shiites and Sunnis that we sometimes see in the Middle East is a marriage of convenience. It's not true love, and it's not gonna last. Those grievances are gonna get back into full scale once the option is there. I don't think that's a winning strategy, considering the fact that still the largest sect of Islam is Sunnah, not Shia. And in Sunni Islam, being a Shiite is actually a way to curse a person. So yeah, those grievances are alive and well as the obvious fact that Iran is situated in a much less favorable geopolitical location to cooperate with Europe. Either way, stupid decision that Europe will probably make while trying to avoid getting into the Middle Eastern mud, something that, guess what, is unavoidable when there is no alternative to the ideology called Islam. Not really. Unless you actually take advantage of the fact that there are groups in the Middle East that one of them just went extinct, but for example, the Iranians seem to be pretty promising in their kind of prospect for a better future if only there was an actual support for regime change there. But who am I to judge? You want Israel to disappear. Nobody talks about Iran regime change as much as they do about making Israel disappear. So it's what you wish for. So who am I to judge, right? Who am I? Okay, so after we have went through the natural resources Israel has, for example, the Dead Sea and water, but now we know that the water was a scam all along because Israelis mostly drink seawater, not fresh water. I mean, they desalinate it, but still it's seawater. That's not a real resource. So, gas. When it comes to gas, I'll put my bets on Turkey taking over. Maybe I'm wrong, but let's explore Turkey first and then move on to Egypt. Turkey has a very big conventional army. Technically, they'll be able to take over first, and Egypt has a strong navy as well. They can fight Turkey, but
it's impressively pathetic that the American-funded Egyptian army cannot save itself. You see, the biggest loser from the Houthi attack are the Egyptians that basically make all of their money out of the Suez Canal.
You know what? Egypt needs this gas, so they might grab it, but they have to also control their population, and it's complicated because, they don't have resources that are food.
But you know what's more terrifying? That Egypt is so close to total collapse and 120 million refugees coming and swimming to Europe, and I think they're gonna be so good at swimming that they also gonna swim from Europe to the United States, and that would be pretty impressive. But
if we remove the assumption that there is a foreign power that is pressuring Egypt, the combination of the very problematic economical situation that Egypt is in and the lack of other resources, they might be able to wring out way more money out of Europe, even more than what they do now.
This is a form of corruption for those who are confused.
But I'm sure the students chanting "Free, Free Palestine" will once again show their generosity and help Egypt contain itself. And that way, the region will be stable again. The Egyptian economy relies on trade passing through the Suez Canal.
And they need these ships to go through the Suez Canal to get the tariffs. It's like $9 billion a year.
The current situation is a situation that shows that even though they lost a lot of their income, the Egyptian army proved itself to be not effective at all.
Yeah, they are risking economic collapse. They have fighter jets. They just bought some from China that are brand new. And I don't think the Houthis have any, so they can even use the old F-16s. So just go bomb the Houthis. You need those ships to pass through your canal so that you would have money. But no, instead, now let's risk Egyptian collapse. Like the situation in Egypt is dire.
Another not very effective army is the Saudi army. They might decide to go professional and defend themselves. They probably would not like the idea of being under the Ottomans again or Iran.
Oops, that's a spoiler.
The more Eurocentric people might also suggest Cyprus taking over, but I don't know, they can't even take that half of the country that Turkey took over though, so...
Not impressive.
Iraq has to cross Jordan to get to the Mediterranean, so I'm gonna just say it's too far. Lebanon is gonna be in a civil war. I see no way out of it, and I'm gonna address that a little bit more later. Another country is Syria. Syria is like a playground where Iran, Russia, Turkey, and others just check each other. Even now, with Syria, I'm gonna say that Assad is in control and they're not happy with Hezbollah. They want them out. They want Iran out. So I'm gonna assume that Iran is actually out. And I'm gonna go back to Syria later. Jordan would probably descend into chaos way too quickly after the collapse of Israel for this regime to even survive. They are kind of hated by their people, believe it or not. Iran is trying to take over Jordan using their Shiite militias via Iraq. So they could take over Jordan, or Saudi could take over Jordan, or Saudi could protect Jordan, and then with the Americans, they would keep the king in power. In a miraculous case that Jordan survives, it's not worth much. All right, we also have Saudi and Iran. Iran is kind of far, but it already took over Iraq via their militias. And the Shia militias in Iraq seem to have taken over already completely, while in Lebanon, I think it would be more of a civil war because of the percentages of the Shiites in the population in general, and because since it's Israel disappearing tomorrow, it is already pretty unstable. Hezbollah is a bit not as strong as it used to be, so the likeliness of Lebanon not getting into civil war is kind of low because Israel is disappearing tomorrow out of the blue and the damage was already done And because if I start talking about the expected civil war in Iraq, that would get me to Kurdish people and so many other minorities in the area and other countries, and I feel like the list of countries I'm naming is way too long, so I'm gonna pretend Iraq is stable and was just taken over by Iran. It's a mess anyway, so Iraq is gonna be kinda crappy and in shambles the way it's kinda is already, so it's gonna get worse. I'll just ignore it, okay? Anyway, Iran will not get to Jerusalem via water, so they are out of the gas question. Of course, there are also the Saudis, but I'm not sure how much the Saudis are into conquest and colonization right now. Turkey seems to be a lot more in the mood. Yeah. Another local player that is local because of Syria is Russia. Russia taking over those gas fields and in general this geographical area might be the thing that would allow it to completely cut off Europe from any energy resources that are not nukes or renewable energy. Okay. Would Russia and Turkey fight each other the way they do now in Syria? Or a scenario where Turkey and Russia might have some sort of agreement to cooperate and together completely suffocate Europe does exist. I wouldn't completely mark it off. Anyway, that will definitely show Europe who's the boss. And things will get a lot more expensive. You know, when the Ottomans cut the Silk Road, they had to go to sea exploration to try to find new ways to get those resources they fundamentally needed. Maybe Europe would be encouraged to replace that sea expedition with underwater expedition and space expedition instead. Just saying. If we are already bringing up old nightmares, and of course Turkey, then the Ottoman Empire cutting off the Silk Road was a real nightmare. Here's another one, the Suez Canal crisis. People maybe don't remember it as well because it was kind of swept under the rug because a country that should not be named and cannot be named, and we ignored that it ever existed because it doesn't, not in this timeline. The Jews joined in to change the power balance. Here is another way to suffocate Europe. Not only the Silk Road, which is being rebuilt right now by China, but the Suez Canal crisis was also a beautiful nightmare where Nasser had a contract with Europe, I mean specifically Britain and France, and he decided not to follow the contract that he himself had signed because he wanted to suffocate Europe. That's the truth. He wanted to suffocate Europe. He didn't like Europe. He wanted revenge on Europe because he was not the greatest person, okay? He also used chemical weapons later on in Yemen when he tried to take over the Bab el-Mandeb Strait between Yemen and Africa. That was specifically to sabotage Israel though, because Israel has access to the Red Sea, but Europe doesn't. Long story short, they failed with Israel. Oh look, Europe's old trauma of when the Ottoman Empire cut their access to the Silk Road is at it again. Yeah, so it might encourage them to go to Mars and try to get resources there though. I'm not sure how they'd get the raw materials needed to build spaceships and submarines, but maybe they can use some scrap metals from cars and stuff like that. Recycling. If Europe doesn't want to go to space or underwater resources, expedition, whatever, they might need to beg America to protect them or use their own militaries. Or Turkey might remember that it is part of NATO and will take over the area without blocking Europe access to trade. And Egypt might help with that too. Depends. If Israel disappearing would lead to the relaxation of the Islamic sentiments of the Muslim populations in the Middle East, then sure, they might cooperate with Europe and make the region stable again. But I don't want to scare you guys. Even though I'm sure this is the path they'll choose, I do need to bring the other option, which is really like the chances of it happening is really small, but I think for fairness, I do need to bring it up. If, let's say, they decide that Israel disappearing is a proof that Allah is great, and it will prove the Islamic sentiment and the greatness of Islam and the Muslim Ummah,
Europe is not Muslim. It doesn't have Sharia everywhere. Europe did have a lot of Christian-Muslim wars. Now it might be something like liberal versus Muslim wars because, I don't know, the Christian population might be shrinking. But the non-hijab wearers versus the hijab wearers, people who believe in Sharia versus those who don't, the religion warm memories of Europe might not be just memories anymore. Let's talk about Jerusalem and just Jerusalem. We're gonna name all the holy places in Israel as Jerusalem. If you feel like, hey, what about my holy place? Just imagine that the name Jerusalem is also including that specific holy place. Both Saudi and Iran have way more natural resources than this crappy piece of land can offer, right? They have their own gas and oil and way more than whatever Israel has. So it's not that is that attractive to them, but they can project power by taking over Jerusalem. Saudi and Yemen were fighting for 10 years, and this is actually the fight between Saudi and Iran. If Iran manages to destroy Israel, then it's a proof that the Shiites are the ones that should control, and they would be obligated to continue and attack Mecca, more likely than not. Here is a fun fact. Jerusalem is not that important to the Shiite Muslims, but since Iran had propped up Jerusalem for political reasons, saying Al-Aqsa is there, in Shiite Islam, Al-Aqsa is not in Jerusalem, it's not even on earth. So once you had made those political statements, you might as well stick to it. Amazing. Iran would want to control Mecca and Jerusalem. They believe that their version of Islam is the version that has to dominate, and unfortunately, the Palestinians are mostly Sunni, so they would have to convert to Shia or something, or, I don't know, submit to Iran. They might try to conquer Jerusalem, but that is after they win against the Turks. Yeah, the Turkish people have that crazy national pride in them, and the Egyptians, maybe not. Anyway, those Shiite militias are probably not going to stay loyal to Iran anyway after they take over Jerusalem, but, that's not my problem. The fact is it's going to be so complicated that it's probably just going to be a complete, everybody on everybody kind of situation, Chaos is most likely to be what will follow the demise of Israel, and that is the scariest outcome. Lebanon is at a civil war. Jordan is not there. Syria also, and then Iraq. Then there is a great chance the Egyptian army would be busy depressing its own population. And there is nothing you can do about it. But at least that's not America's problem, right? Or is it? I mean, Turkey is a NATO member. I think that's an organization America is part of. But it wasn't a problem when they took over Cyprus. And their tendency to bomb their own Kurdish population also doesn't seem to be much of an issue. And somebody has to take the job of securing the trade paths. So I guess if Turkey cooperates with Europe, we will see the return of the Ottoman Empire. I wonder what China would choose to do though. In this video though, I want to reach an equilibrium. I want this area to be stable. This is why I don't want to involve the Saudis too much. So let's say neither the Ottomans or the Iranians try to take over Mecca, and the Saudis get to just be the way they are and everything's cool. Then sure, let's say whoever takes over this area is cooperating with Europe and everything is fine. That's it, the cake is cut. We have Jerusalem under some Muslim authority. That area will be maintained. I'm not sure anybody cares about anything that is beside the square that contains Al-Aqsa, but whatever, okay. Let's say Jerusalem is maintained. The Iranians and the Turks don't really like Arabs, so I doubt they would really try to develop this area to be prosperous. So once the natural resources are depleted, the land itself is not worth much, so probably nobody is gonna invest in it. Right now, Israel is a prosperous country, a successful country, not because of the land, but because its biggest resource is high-tech technologies. They are kind of tied to Jewish brains though. It's kind of hard to take over those resources without keeping the Jews, unless
You know what? I'm sure there are many scientists and engineers that are ready to take their place in a moment's notice, just like Nazi Germany didn't need the Jews to develop nuclear weapons. Oh wait, they couldn't. This video is not intended to celebrate the Jewish contribution to the world. Everybody knows they cheated and they never deserved 20% of the world's Nobel Prizes. It was always the Palestinians that were the ones who deserved it. It was taken away from them by Jews cheating. Anyway, the cake was cut and everyone is happy. Thank goodness. Free Palestine. If you like what I do and you want to support this channel, please consider going to one of the links below, whether it's PayPal or Buy Me Coffee or Patreon. Your donations are the reason I can keep going. Thank you so much, and subscribe, like, comment, and share this video. And thank you so much for watching. See you later.